First story, the case of Jesse Long, USA. The chill wasn't just the autumn air biting at my bare legs that evening in 1957. It seeped from the very ground of that Ohio cornfield, rising to meet the unnatural cold emanating from above. I was small then, maybe 5, chasing fireflies when the world tilted sideways. Not literally, but in my young mind, the familiar rustle of corn stalks and chirping crickets dissolved into an unnerving silence, broken only by a high-pitched whine that vibrated in my teeth. Then it descended. It wasn't a plane, not a helicopter, nothing of this earth. Silent, impossibly sleek, casting no shadow in the twilight, it hovered above the field, bathing the golden stalks in an eerie silver glow. From it emerged something else, taller than any man I'd ever seen, its form elongated, limbs impossibly thin, head bulbous and out of proportion. Its eyes, those are the images that still claw at my sleep. Large, black, bottomless pits that swallowed the light and seemed to pierce through me, seeing things no child should ever be privy to. That night was just the overture. The abduction in that field was the first note in a symphony of terror that would compose my life. They came back, again and again, throughout my childhood, adolescence, into manhood. Each encounter chipped away at my sanity, leaving me isolated, adrift in a reality no one else seemed to share, or perhaps dared to acknowledge. But the physical abductions were only part of it. The dreams, those were the true nightmare fuel. Vivid, visceral, and undeniably real, they were populated by children unlike any I'd ever seen. Hybrids, beings with a disconcerting mix of human and something else. And they felt connected to me, familiar, too familiar. Were they using me, my DNA, creating some unholy lineage in the cold vacuum of space? This is my story, the case of Jesse Long, and believe me, it is far from closed. The world I inhabited was, on the surface, utterly ordinary. Small-town Ohio, the late 1950s. All picket fences and soda fountains, a veneer of post-war American normalcy. Beneath it, however, pulsed a current of unease, a Cold War paranoia that mirrored the personal dread gnawing at my young soul. Jesse Long. That was me. An unremarkable boy in an unremarkable place, destined for an unremarkable life, or so it should have been. But the cornfield incident shattered that illusion, thrusting me into a reality where the mundane and the monstrous coexisted in terrifying proximity. My family, loving, hard-working folks, were steeped in the pragmatic realities of Midwestern life. Faith, family, and hard work. These were the pillars of their world. Aliens, spaceships, abductions, madness, pure and simple. So silence became my shield. The chasm between my internal reality and the accepted world widened with each passing year, each clandestine encounter. My motivation, initially, was simple survival. Navigate a world that was no longer safe, keep the secret, and somehow endure. As years bled into decades, the world around me evolved. The innocence of the 50s gave way to the turbulent 60s, the cynical 70s, the material 80s, and the dawning anxieties of the 90s. Through it all, the abductions continued, a constant, unwelcome counterpoint to the changing times. My initial childish fear morphed into a more complex tapestry of emotions. Resentment, confusion, a desperate yearning for understanding. Who were they? What did they want? Why me? The hybrid children in my dreams became a constant source of torment and perverse fascination. They were a question mark etched into my psyche, a living embodiment of the violation I endured, yet also, disturbingly, a potential connection. A twisted form of family born of the stars and the shadows. My motivation shifted, subtly, insidiously. Survival was no longer enough. I needed answers. I needed to understand the purpose behind this lifelong ordeal, even if the truth proved to be more horrifying than the silence. The quiet, American life I was meant to have was irrevocably gone, replaced by the unsettling, terrifying case of Jesse Long. The whispers started subtly during the familiar cold examinations. Not spoken words, but thoughts, impressions planted directly in my mind. They weren't just taking samples, they were communicating. And the message was chilling. The hybrid children weren't merely experiments. They were a bridge, a planned evolution. My DNA wasn't just harvested, it was chosen. Suddenly, the nightmares weren't just terrifying. They were a glimpse into a future I was unwillingly, inextricably bound to create. My initial goal was simple: survive. Survive the night, survive the next encounter, survive the gnawing fear that had become my constant companion. But survival in silence is a slow form of self-destruction. The first obstacle was the wall of disbelief. Telling my parents was unthinkable. Their kind, worried faces would only twist into pity or worse, dismissal. Friends, laughter, mockery, instant ostracization. So I retreated inwards, building walls of secrecy around my terror. This isolation became a prison. My goal shifted from mere survival to something more desperate: understanding. Who were these beings? What did they want? The whispers in my mind hinted at a purpose beyond simple experimentation, a grand design involving the hybrid children, but the details remained frustratingly vague. My research began subtly. Library books on unexplained phenomena, hushed conversations with fringe figures at county fairs who spoke of flying saucers and government cover-ups. These were tentative steps, fueled by desperation, often leading to dead ends and more confusion. The obstacles multiplied. The physical toll of the abductions was becoming undeniable. Chronic fatigue, headaches that pounded behind my eyes for days, strange rashes that appeared and vanished without explanation. Doctors offered platitudes and prescriptions for anxiety, further cementing my isolation. They treated the symptoms, not the cause, a cause I couldn't even articulate without sounding insane. My relationships suffered. Intimacy became impossible. How could I explain the constant dread, the feeling of being watched, the nightmares that bled into daylight? Dating was a farce, friendships superficial. I was living a double life, outwardly normal, inwardly consumed by a cosmic horror no one else could see. My goal of understanding was now intertwined with a desperate need for validation, for someone, anyone, to believe me, to share the burden, or at least acknowledge its existence. But in the late 20th century in small-town America, admitting to alien abduction was a one-way ticket to ridicule and further isolation. The case of Jesse Long was building brick by silent brick, a prison of fear and unanswered questions. The inciting incident wasn't a blinding flash of light or a dramatic spaceship landing. It was subtler, insidious, creeping into my already fractured reality like a venomous tendril. It started with the dreams intensifying. The hybrid children, always present, became more insistent. Their silent gazes held a new urgency, a palpable distress I felt resonating within my own being. Then came the physical sensation, a phantom ache in my chest, a persistent unease that mirrored the anxiety I sensed emanating from them in my dreams. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them. And then the news report started. Isolated incidents at first, dismissed as mass hysteria or misidentification. Strange lights in the sky, unusual atmospheric phenomena in rural areas, not far from my small Ohio town. The reports were vague, quickly buried beneath more credible news, but I recognized the patterns. These weren't random events. They were connected to them, connected to me. The urgency became a physical pressure, a knot tightening in my stomach. I couldn't ignore it any longer. My quiet desperation for understanding morphed into a desperate need to act, to do something. But what? Where do you even begin when your enemy, your tormentors, are beings from beyond human comprehension? The status quo shattered. Passive observation was no longer an option. The whispers in my dreams had become a silent scream, and I knew with chilling certainty that the case of Jesse Long was about to become something far more dangerous, far more real than I could ever have imagined. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a pawn. Whether I wanted it or not, I was now a player. The immediate consequence was a chilling escalation in the abductions. They became more frequent, more invasive, no longer just sterile examinations, but focused, almost frantic procedures. The whispers intensified, becoming clearer, more demanding. The hybrid children they communicated were in danger. Their environment was failing. They needed something from me. This vague, terrifying demand became my new obsession. What could I possibly offer beings from another world? Beings who manipulated space and time with apparent ease. My research intensified, moving beyond dusty library books to whispered rumors of clandestine government agencies, hushed online forums where self-proclaimed experiencers shared fragmented tales of similar encounters. It was a descent into paranoia, but within the static I found a name: Dr. Amelia Reed. A parapsychologist, discredited by the mainstream, but whispered to be a collector of anomalous cases. A lifeline, perhaps. Reaching out to Dr. Reed was a leap of faith, a crack in my carefully constructed wall of secrecy. She listened, initially with professional detachment, but as I recounted my lifetime of abductions, the dreams of hybrid children, the escalating urgency, a flicker of something else sparked in her eyes: recognition, belief. She didn't dismiss me. That alone was a revelation. Dr. Reed became my unlikely ally, a bridge to a world beyond my isolated experience. Her initial suggestion was simple, almost mundane: hypnosis. To delve deeper into my memories, to unlock the suppressed details of the encounters, to perhaps understand what something the aliens needed. It was a daunting prospect, a vulnerability I'd avoided for decades. But the urgency of the hybrid children's silent plea, the growing sense of impending crisis, pushed me forward. The case of Jesse Long was no longer just about my survival or even my understanding. It was about something far bigger, something potentially catastrophic. And I, Jesse Long, was inexplicably, terrifyingly at the center of it. Hypnosis unlocked, a floodgate of suppressed memories, far more vivid and disturbing than I could have imagined. The sterile rooms weren't just labs, they were nurseries, genetic banks, vast repositories of biological material. The hybrid children weren't just experiments, they were a desperate attempt at species survival, their own world dying, their genetic code failing. My DNA, specifically, was the key, a rare anomaly, possessing a resilience and adaptability they desperately needed to revitalize their failing race. But the memories also revealed a darker subplot. Not all the aliens were united in this endeavor. There was a faction, a splinter group, who saw the hybrids not as salvation, but as contamination. They believed in racial purity, even in the cold vacuum of space, and viewed the human element as a corruption of their lineage. This faction was actively working against the main group, sabotaging the hybrid project, perhaps even seeking to eliminate them entirely. The stakes escalated. It wasn't just about my personal horror anymore, it was about the survival of an entire species, a species intricately, tragically linked to my own. Dr. Reed, initially a detached observer, became deeply invested, her scientific curiosity morphing into something akin to protectiveness. She saw in me not just a case study, but a potential key to averting a cosmic tragedy. Our relationship deepened, a fragile bond forged in the crucible of shared fear and impossible truths. But the tension mounted. The whispers became warnings. The rogue faction was growing bolder, their sabotage more direct. The hybrid children's distress intensified in my dreams, now laced with fear, with a desperate plea for help, not just for their survival, but for their very existence. I was faced with an impossible dilemma. How to help beings from another world, beings I barely understood, beings who had violated me countless times, when I couldn't even protect myself from the unseen forces closing in, threatening to tear apart not just my sanity but the fragile threads of hope for a future I never asked to be a part of. The case of Jesse Long was no longer just a personal nightmare, it was a cosmic crossroads. A major turning point came during one particularly intense hypnotic regression. Dr. Reed pushed deeper, past the clinical details of examinations and genetic procedures, into the emotional core of the alien encounters. And there, buried beneath layers of fear and violation, was a connection I hadn't consciously acknowledged. Empathy. Not just for the hybrid children, but for the beings themselves. They were desperate, their actions driven not by malice, but by a primal need to survive, to save their dying species. This revelation, shattering my long-held perception of them as emotionless monsters, was the first crack in the wall of my fear, allowing a sliver of reluctant understanding to seep in. But the empathy came with a terrifying price. The rogue faction's attacks escalated, no longer subtle sabotage. They were now direct, violent intrusions into my abductions. During one encounter I was caught in a crossfire, a chaotic energy surge that ripped through the sterile room, inflicting searing pain, leaving me weakened and disoriented for days. It was a clear message. My continued cooperation with the main group was a direct threat to the rogue faction's agenda. I was no longer just a source of genetic material, I was now a target. Reed, witnessing the physical aftermath of the attack, saw a new determination ignite within me. Fear was being replaced by a grim resolve. The case of Jesse Long was no longer just about survival or understanding. It was becoming a fight. Fight for the future of beings I barely knew. Beings I had every reason to hate, but beings who, in their desperate struggle for survival, mirrored something profoundly human within myself. Preparation for the climax involved a precarious dance between survival and cooperation. Dr. Reed, using her limited resources and underground contacts, managed to amplify my ability to communicate with the main alien faction. It wasn't verbal, not in any human sense, but through focused thought, directed intention. I learned to project my consciousness, to send messages across the vast, unknowable gulf that separated us. They responded, hesitantly at first, then with increasing urgency, sharing fragmented images of their dying world, the growing desperation of the hybrid children, and the escalating threat of the rogue faction. A surprising alliance formed. A shadowy figure emerged from Dr. Reed's network, a former military intelligence operative with a clandestine interest in UFO phenomena. Agent Davies, cynical and pragmatic, initially saw me as a potential weapon, a tool to be exploited. But as he witnessed the undeniable reality of my experiences, the palpable threat of the rogue aliens, a grudging respect, even a form of reluctant camaraderie developed between us. He offered resources, protection, a connection to a world beyond Dr. Reed's academic circles, a world of covert operations and hidden knowledge. A minor resolution came in the form of understanding the something the aliens needed. Through the amplified communication, it became clear. It wasn't just my DNA. It was my consciousness. A specific frequency, a unique pattern within my neural network that held the key to stabilizing the hybrid children's failing genetic structure. They needed to integrate my consciousness, or a part of it, into their own system, a risky, potentially irreversible procedure. But foreshadowing clouded this fragile hope. Agent Davies uncovered intelligence suggesting the rogue faction was planning a major attack, not just on me, but on the main alien group, intending to eliminate the hybrid project entirely and secure their vision of racial purity. A betrayal loomed. Whispers within Dr. Reed's network hinted at a mole, someone feeding information to the rogue faction. Uncertainty and paranoia tightened their grip. The stage was set. The climax was approaching, a confrontation not just between alien factions, but for the very future of the hybrid children, a future inextricably linked to the fate of Jesse Long. Final tensions ratcheted to an almost unbearable degree. The rogue faction's attack was imminent, their signals now a chaotic storm in the alien communication network I was tenuously connected to. Agent Davies, working frantically, pinpointed their likely attack vector, not against the alien ship, directly, but against me here, on Earth, during the consciousness transfer procedure. They intended to sever the link, to destroy the hybrid's last hope, and likely, me along with it. The final challenge was stark. The transfer had to happen, and it had to happen now before the rogue faction struck. But the procedure was untested, dangerous, its effects on me unknown. Dr. Reed, her face etched with worry, laid out the grim probabilities. Loss of consciousness, permanent neural damage, even death were all possibilities. The emotionally charged stake was not just my life, but the fate of the hybrid children, beings I had grown to feel a strange, paternal responsibility for. The narrative threads converged with suffocating pressure. The alien factions were on a collision course, their conflict centered around my very being. The betrayal within Dr. Reed's network remained a shadowy threat, adding a layer of paranoia and distrust. My own personal journey, from terrified child to unwilling participant in a cosmic drama, was hurtling towards its terrifying, uncertain conclusion. Everything was set. The climax was not just approaching, It was crashing down, inevitable and unstoppable, a horrifying confluence of personal horror and interstellar conflict, with Jesse Long, the unremarkable man from Ohio, standing at the very epicenter. The climax began with a searing white light engulfing me, cold fire spreading through my veins as the transfer initiated. Simultaneously, chaos erupted, not in the sterile lab Dr. Reed had secured, but in my mind, a psychic assault as the rogue faction descended, their hateful energy tearing at the fragile link connecting me to the main alien group and the hybrid children. It was a battle for my consciousness, a tug of war for my very soul, fought across dimensions. I saw them then, not physically but in my mind's eye, the rogue aliens, distorted monstrous figures of pure hatred, and the hybrid children, fragile, pleading, their existence hanging in the balance. A choice presented itself, stark and terrifying. Succumb to the rogue faction, let the hybrids perish, and perhaps find a twisted form of peace in oblivion, or fight for beings who had violated me, for a future I never asked for a hope that felt both alien and profoundly human. And in that moment, the years of fear, the decades of violation, transformed into something unexpected. Resolve. I pushed back, not with weapons or force, but with will. With the accumulated weight of my experiences, my pain, my reluctant empathy, I focused on the hybrid children, on their silent plea, on the fragile hope they represented. And something shifted. The rogue faction's assault faltered, their hateful energy recoiling against a force they hadn't anticipated. Human resilience forged in the crucible of unimaginable horror. The transfer completed. Silence descended, broken only by my ragged breaths. The white light faded, replaced by the dim fluorescence of the lab. Dr. Reed and Agent Davies watched, their faces a mixture of relief and exhaustion. I was still Jesse Long, but something was different. A faint echo resonated within me, a connection to something vast and unknown, a silent promise. The hybrid children were safe, for now. The case of Jesse Long remained officially unsolved, another dismissed footnote in the vast, indifferent universe. But our story, the story of contact, of violation, of unexpected connection, it continues. Look to the skies, not with fear, but with open eyes. The truth is out there, waiting to be acknowledged. In the aftermath, life didn't magically reset. The scars, both physical and emotional, remained. The abductions lessened, but the connection persisted. A quiet hum in the background of my awareness. A constant reminder of the children out there, thriving, building their bridge to a future beyond my comprehension. Dr. Reed, vindicated but weary, continued her research, a Cassandra figure warning of truths humanity wasn't ready to face. Agent Davies, his cynicism softened by what he'd witnessed, vanished back into the shadows, a silent guardian of secrets the world preferred to ignore. For me, Jesse Long, there was no parade, no recognition, just a quiet, persistent ache of loss and a strange, unsettling sense of purpose. The moral isn't simple. There are no easy answers in the vast, terrifying unknown. Fear is a natural response, but it can blind us to connection, to empathy, even to the echoes of ourselves in the most alien of others. My life was defined by violation, by horror, yet it culminated in a twisted form of parenthood, a responsibility for beings born of the stars, and my stolen DNA. Perhaps the true horror isn't the aliens themselves, but humanity's refusal to look up, to acknowledge the vastness beyond our self-imposed boundaries. The case of Jesse Long is closed in the official files, but the story continues. The hybrid children are out there. The rogue faction remains a threat. The universe is vast, and we are not alone. Open your minds, question your reality, and consider the chilling possibility that the extraordinary might be far more ordinary than you dare to imagine. Listen closely in the quiet of the night. You might just hear the hum. Second story, the case of Pascuales, 2002, Mexico. Pascuales in 2002 was a place where life moved with the rhythm of the tides and the turn of the fishing seasons. For generations, families like mine had cast our nets into the Pacific, relying on the ocean's bounty. I, Pascual, knew these waters like the back of my hand. Each current, each reef, every shift in the wind, they were etched into my very being. The night of the incident started like any other. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the promise of a good catch. My old boat, La Esperanza, hummed beneath me, a familiar comfort against the vast darkness of the sea. The stars were bright, scattered across the inky canvas above, and the moon cast a silver path on the water. It was a peaceful night, the kind that soothes the soul and makes you feel connected to something larger than yourself. I was alone, as always, my thoughts drifting with the gentle sway of the boat, my focus sharp on the subtle tug of the fishing lines. Then the sky changed, not with clouds, nor with a storm, but with a light unlike anything I had ever witnessed. It wasn't a plane, not a star falling, but something else. It descended with impossible speed, silent yet demanding attention, cutting through the familiar darkness like a knife. The peaceful rhythm of the night shattered, replaced by an icy grip of unease that tightened around my heart. Fear, raw and primal, coiled in my gut as the light grew closer, brighter, casting long, distorted shadows across the waves. My world, once predictable and safe, tilted on its axis. In that moment, surrounded by the vast, silent ocean and watched by an impossible light from above, I knew that my life, and perhaps the world as I understood it, was about to change forever. Pascuales was more than just a dot on the map. It was the heart of my world. Generations of my family had lived and died here, their lives interwoven with the rhythms of the Pacific. We were fishermen, through and through, our days dictated by the tides, our fortunes tied to the ocean's unpredictable moods. My life, like those before me, was simple, but deeply connected to this place, to this way of life. I wasn't a man of grand ambitions. My world was defined by the horizon, my dreams measured in the weight of the day's catch. La Esperanza, my boat, wasn't just a vessel. She was an extension of myself, a trusted companion in the solitude of the open sea. Every creak and groan of her aging timbers was a familiar language, every roll and pitch in the waves a dance we performed together. I poured my sweat and earnings into her upkeep, ensuring she was always seaworthy, reliable, a safe haven in the vastness of the ocean. She represented my independence, my livelihood, my connection to my heritage. My days were long and demanding, but there was a profound satisfaction in the work. The quiet solitude of the pre-dawn hours, the camaraderie with other fishermen in the village, the honest labor under the scorching sun. It was a life of simple pleasures and deep-rooted values. Family, faith, and the sea were the cornerstones of our community. binding us together in a shared existence, isolated from the fast-paced world beyond our shores. But beneath the surface of this tranquil existence, there were undercurrents, whispers of the unknown, tales of the sea's mysteries and the night sky's vastness. We were a people who lived close to nature, and we understood its power, its indifference, and its capacity for both beauty and terror. We respected the unseen forces, the things that could not be explained, the shadows that danced at the edges of our understanding. And on that night, those shadows would reach out and touch my life, shattering the familiar peace and plunging me into a nightmare beyond anything I could have ever imagined. The burning marks were just the beginning. Whispers in Pasquale spoke of others, old tales of strange lights and missing fishermen, quickly dismissed as sea myths. But looking closer, faces turned away, eyes held a knowing fear, a secret history hidden beneath the surface of our quiet village. Maybe I wasn't the first. Maybe Pasquale's held a darker truth than I ever imagined. My goal became clear, though terrifying. Understand what happened. Initially, I just wanted to forget, to scrub the alien touch from my mind and body, to return to the familiar rhythm of the sea. But the marks, the nightmares, the unsettling feeling of being different, they wouldn't let me. My first obstacle was disbelief, not just from others, but from myself. Could I truly believe what I knew had happened? The rational part of my mind screamed impossible, yet my body carried the undeniable truth. Don Rafael, the doctor, became a symbol of this wall of disbelief. His kind eyes held concern, but also skepticism. His medical books offered no answers, his science no comfort. He prescribed rest, ointments, earthly remedies for an unearthly wound. His inability to help, while understandable, deepened my isolation, making me feel even more adrift in this impossible reality. Then there were the whispers in Pasquale's. At first just background noise, dismissed stories of strange lights and lost fishermen. But as I listened closer, to hushed conversations in the cantina, to averted glances in the market, I sensed a different tone. Fear, not dismissal, lurked beneath the surface. Old man Elias, his eyes clouded with age and perhaps something more hinted at the others, at things best left undisturbed. These fragmented whispers became a thread, a dark, unsettling subplot that tugged at my curiosity, suggesting I wasn't alone in this experience and that Pasquale's held secrets older and stranger than I ever imagined. Perhaps understanding what happened meant unraveling the hidden history of my own village. The inciting incident arrived not as another light in the sky, but as an absence on the water. Old man Elias, the village elder who had hinted at past secrets, didn't return from his usual morning fishing trip. It wasn't unusual for boats to be delayed, but Elias was as predictable as the tides, his routines as ingrained as the village's heartbeat. By midday, when La Sirena, his small weathered boat, was found drifting empty near the reef, a chilling unease settled over Pasquale's. Whispers, no longer dismissive myths, turned to anxious murmurs. Elias was a skilled fisherman. The sea was calm that morning. His boat was sound. There was no logical explanation for his disappearance. The villagers searched, their boats fanning out across the bay, their calls echoing across the water, but Elias was gone, vanished without a trace. The circular marks on my skin burned with a renewed intensity, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Don Rafael, His usual pragmatic demeanor shaken, organized a more extensive search involving the coast. Guard from the next town. But deep down, we all knew Elias was lost to the sea or to something else entirely. The whispers grew louder, bolder, fueled by fear and a dawning realization that the old stories might be more than just tales. The phrase, "lights in the sky," was no longer just folklore. It was spoken with a new weight, a chilling resonance. For me, Elias's disappearance was a brutal confirmation. It wasn't just my isolated experience. It was happening again. Perhaps it had been happening for a long time. The sea, our livelihood, our comfort, had become a hunting ground. My personal quest for understanding transformed into something larger, something urgent. I had to know what was taking our people, what lurked beneath the surface of the calm sea and the silent night sky. For Elias, for Pascuales, and for myself, I had to find the truth. Elias's vanishing act cast a long, dark shadow over Pascuales. Fear became a tangible presence, hanging heavy in the air like the humid sea mist. Fishermen hesitated to go out, alone, their boats now venturing out in nervous groups, huddling together for a semblance of safety against an unseen threat. The vibrant marketplace, once bustling with lively bartering, grew subdued. Conversations hushed, punctuated by anxious glances towards the horizon. The rhythm of Pascuales, once dictated by the sea, was now dictated by fear. For me, the consequence was a deepening resolve, a burning need to find answers. Forget just understanding my own experience. Now, it was about protecting Pascuales, about preventing this from happening again. My motivation shifted from personal trauma to communal responsibility. But how could I fight an enemy I couldn't see, understand a phenomenon that defied logic? My challenge became not just disbelief, but also helplessness. Adding to the growing unease, a stranger arrived in Pascuales. A woman, Elena, with eyes as sharp as obsidian and an air of detached curiosity that set her apart from the villagers. She claimed to be a researcher, interested in local folklore, specifically the tales of lights in the sky. Her questions, probing and insistent, stirred up unease, yet also a flicker of hope. Could she be an ally? Or was she just another outsider, drawn by morbid curiosity to our growing tragedy? Elena's arrival introduced a new subplot, the potential of external help versus the risk of exploitation. She offered a different perspective, a vocabulary beyond our village's understanding, speaking of unexplained aerial phenomena and extraterrestrial hypotheses. But her detached demeanor, her relentless questioning, made me wary. Was she truly trying to help? Or was Pascuales just another case study for her research, our fear and pain mere data points in her academic pursuit? And what if her presence attracted unwanted attention, bringing more of the unknown to our doorstep? The dynamics within Pascuales also shifted. Don Rafael, shaken by Elias's disappearance and my persistent story, began to look at me with less skepticism, more a troubled concern. He admitted hesitantly that there were things science couldn't explain. Whispers of old wives' tales even he couldn't entirely dismiss. This slight shift in his perspective, a crack in the wall of disbelief, offered a fragile hope, a potential alliance in my increasingly desperate search for answers. But it also highlighted the growing panic in the village. A fear so profound it was forcing even the most pragmatic minds to consider the impossible. The tension in Pascuales snapped when Miguel, a young, hot-headed fisherman, claimed to have seen lights again, closer this time over the village itself. Panic erupted. Some wanted to flee inland, abandoning their homes, their livelihoods. Others, fueled by fear and desperation, spoke of fighting back, of taking boats out to confront whatever lurked in the darkness. The village, once a haven of quiet routine, threatened to tear itself apart, fractured by fear and misinformation. Elena, surprisingly, became a voice of relative calm amidst the chaos. She proposed a different approach: observation, documentation. She asked for my help, believing my experience gave me a unique perspective. This offered a dilemma: trust this outsider, potentially putting myself and Pascuales at further risk, or remain isolated, paralyzed by fear, while the situation escalated. I chose to cautiously trust her, driven by the desperate hope of finding answers, of gaining some control over the terrifying unknown. Our uneasy alliance deepened as we began our observation. Nights became vigils, watching the skies, listening to the whispers of the sea, trying to decipher patterns in the strange occurrences. Elena revealed more about herself, hinting at past experiences with similar phenomena, a personal quest that mirrored my own in its desperate search for meaning. But her detached scientific approach often clashed with my raw, emotional need for answers, for justice, for an end to the terror gripping Pascuales. Don Rafael, witnessing the escalating fear and the village's descent into near hysteria, made a difficult choice. He publicly acknowledged the strangeness of Elias's disappearance and my experience, not confirming the alien explanation, but admitting that something inexplicable was happening. This fragile admission, while offering some validation, also ignited further panic and suspicion within Pascuales, dividing the village even more. The subplots intertwined: the external threat, Elena's investigation, and the internal fracturing of Pascuales, all converging, ratcheting up the tension, pushing us closer to a breaking point. Our nightly vigils with Elena yielded something more than just fear, patterns. She meticulously charted sightings, noting times, directions, and types of lights. A chilling realization emerged. The lights weren't random. They seemed to be focused on Pascuales, or perhaps on something within Pascuales. This shifted our perspective from random cosmic horror to something targeted, intentional. The question became not just what are they? The turning point came during one particularly intense night watch. The lights appeared again, multiple and closer than ever before, pulsing with an almost aggressive energy. Elena, her detached facade finally cracking, revealed a hidden agenda. She wasn't just researching folklore. She believed Pascuales was a focal point, a place of recurring alien activity. And she suspected the reason was not random abduction, but something far more specific, something connected to the village itself, perhaps even to its history, its people. This revelation forced a difficult choice: continue as passive observers, or actively confront the unknown, risking everything to uncover the truth and protect Pascuales from whatever was targeting it. For me and for Elena, the choice was made. We had to act. The climax was no longer something to be feared in the distance, but something we were now actively approaching head-on. Fueled by Elena's revelation, we shifted from passive observation to active investigation. Our first step was to delve into Pasqualis's history, seeking any anomaly, any forgotten event that might explain the alien interest. Don Rafael, now a reluctant but essential ally, proved invaluable. He unearthed old village records, faded documents hinting at strange occurrences in Pasqualis's past, unexplained illnesses, unusual disappearances, whispers of celestial events long forgotten by most. A minor confrontation arose within the village itself. Miguel, still fueled by fear, accused Elena of being a government agent, of attracting the lights with her outsider's curiosity. His suspicion echoing the village's deep-seated distrust of outsiders, threatened to derail our fragile alliance. It took Don Rafael's respected voice and Elena's calm, reasoned explanations to quell the immediate unrest. But the undercurrent of suspicion remained, a subtle betrayal simmering beneath the surface of Pasqualis. Elena, poring over her charts and Don Rafael's historical documents, noticed a recurring pattern. The alien sightings seemed to cluster around specific dates that coincided with old Pasquales festivals, ancient celebrations linked to the sea and the stars. This subtle foreshadowing hinted at a connection deeper than random encounters, suggesting a ritualistic or cyclical nature to the alien activity, a purpose intertwined with Pasqualis's cultural fabric. A minor plot resolution emerged when we deciphered a faint, recurring signal within Elena's recordings of the lights. It wasn't language, not as we understood it, but a rhythmic pulse, a sequence of light and sound that felt intentional. Elena believed it could be a beacon, a marker, or perhaps even a form of communication, however rudimentary. This small victory, a tiny crack in the wall of the unknown, offered a fragile hope, but also deepened the mystery, raising the stakes and solidifying our resolve to face whatever awaited us. The stage was set. The climax was drawing near, and Pasqualis held its breath. The decoded signal became our focus, a fragile key to unlock the alien mystery. Elena, working tirelessly, refined the pulse, revealing a more complex pattern embedded within it. Coordinates, she believed, geographical points converging on Pasqualis itself, specifically on the ancient village church, built atop the oldest part of the settlement. This revelation sent a chill through us. Was the church the target, a beacon, or something else entirely? The final obstacle materialized as the villagers' fear reached fever pitch. Miguel, rallying the most panicked residents, proposed a drastic measure, burning the church, believing it was attracting the lights, a desperate attempt to sever the connection. This created a devastating dilemma. Protect the church, potentially inviting a direct confrontation with the unknown, or destroy a piece of Pasqualis's history, fracturing the village further in a misguided act of fear. The emotional stakes were immense, pitting Pasquale and Elena against a terrified community, their fragile hope of understanding against the villagers' desperate urge to act, however rashly. Don Rafael, caught between his scientific pragmatism and the escalating terror, made his final choice. He sided with Pasquale and Elena, using his authority to argue against the church's destruction, appealing to reason, to history, to the fragile possibility of understanding before resorting to violence. This alliance solidified the narrative, threads converging. The signal pointing to the church, the villagers' fear threatening to destroy their own heritage, Elena and Pasquale standing against the tide of panic, with Don Rafael's crucial support. The air crackled with anticipation, with a sense of impending confrontation. The climax was upon us, poised to erupt from the heart of Pascuales, from the shadow of the ancient church, beneath the watchful, silent stars. As Miguel led his fear-gripped followers towards the church, the lights intensified, converging directly above the ancient stone structure. The decoded signal, now amplified by Elena's equipment, pulsed outwards from the church's bell tower, a beacon cast into the night. Then a response, not a destructive beam, but a wave of energy, shimmering and ethereal, descended from the lights, enveloping the church and us. The air crackled, not with threat, but with an almost expectant energy. Inside the church, the ancient symbols carved into the stone walls seemed to glow with an inner light, resonating with the alien energy. Elena, eyes wide with awe and a touch of fear, realized the church wasn't just a target, it was a key. The festival dates, the historical anomalies, the signal, it all pointed to a long-standing, almost symbiotic connection between Pascuales and these beings, a ritualistic exchange woven into the very fabric of the village's history. The disappearances, the abductions, were not random acts, but part of a complex, incomprehensible interaction, a dialogue across the stars, using Pascuales as a focal point. The energy subsided, the lights dimmed, the immediate threat, if it ever was one, receded. A profound silence fell over Pascuales, replacing panic with stunned disbelief. Miguel and his followers faltered, their fear giving way to confusion, to a dawning realization that their violent solution was not only wrong, but tragically misguided. The church remained untouched, a silent witness to a cosmic encounter, a symbol not of terror, but of a connection far beyond human understanding. For Pascuales, the climax was not an ending, but a jarring awakening. The village was shaken, fractured, but also irrevocably changed. Don Rafael, witnessing the impossible, embraced the mystery, his science humbled, his mind open to new possibilities. Elena, her research validated in ways she could scarcely imagine, felt a profound sense of responsibility, a need to understand and interpret this cosmic dialogue. And I, Pascual, no longer just a victim, but a witness, a bridge between two realities, knew my journey was far from over. The lights may return, the interaction may continue, the mystery remains vast and unknowable. But Pascuales is no longer just a fishing village. It is a point of contact, a place of wonder and terror, a testament to a universe far stranger and more interconnected than we ever dared to dream. Look to the skies, question your reality, and remember, Pascuales, the truth is out there, waiting to be understood. Pascuales would never be the same. The immediate terror subsided, replaced by a hushed awe and a lingering unease. Fear, once a suffocating blanket, now mixed with a fragile wonder, a hesitant acceptance that their world was larger, stranger than they had ever imagined. Life in the village resumed, but with a subtle shift, a newfound awareness of the sky, of the sea's depths, of the unseen forces that might be watching, listening. For me, Pascual, the fisherman, the abduction was no longer just a trauma, but a strange initiation. I remained in Pascuales, changed but not broken, carrying the weight of knowledge, the burden of proof, and a quiet sense of purpose. Elena continued, her research forever bound to Pascuales. her scientific detachment tempered by a newfound humility before the vastness of the unknown. Don Rafael, the village doctor, became a quiet advocate for open minds. His science expanded to encompass possibilities he once dismissed. His wisdom deepened by the inexplicable. Pascuales became a living testament to the limitations of human understanding, a beacon for those willing to look beyond the familiar. The lights may return. The sea may whisper secrets yet unheard. The universe remains silent, vast and endlessly mysterious. Pascuales learned that fear blinds, but curiosity illuminates. The true horror isn't in the unknown, but in our refusal to acknowledge its existence. Listen closely to the tales whispered on the wind. Look beyond the surface of your reality, and never stop questioning the stars. The case of Pascuales is not closed. It is a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never truly be shut. If you're enjoying this and want to support the channel in bringing more chilling stories like this, any contribution is greatly appreciated. The donation link is just below this video. It's safe, easy, and fast. No registration required. Even the smallest support means so much. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Third story. The Case of St. Petersburg, 2011, Russia. The golden domes of St. Petersburg shimmered under a sky increasingly punctuated by unsettling anomalies in 2011. Whispers turned to murmurs, then to outright pronouncements. Sightings. Unidentified lights danced erratically across the twilight canvas, igniting fervent debates in hushed corners of smoky cafes and crowded kommunalki apartments. Most dismissed them as tricks of the eye, atmospheric quirks, or elaborate hoaxes. I, however, Anya, a student navigating the labyrinthine streets and even more tangled emotions of early adulthood, found myself inexplicably drawn to these aerial enigmas. My world was one of art studios, the scent of oil paints mingling with the ever-present damp air from the canals, and solitary walks along the Neva River, sketchbook in hand. The city's history, a palimpsest of grandeur and tragedy, resonated deeply within me, mirroring the unspoken anxieties that seemed woven into the fabric of my family. While others debated the extraterrestrial, I felt a creeping unease, a premonition that these lights were not merely distant spectacles, but harbingers of something profoundly personal and unsettling. The news reports, initially sensational, began to adopt a tone of cautious officialdom, speaking of unidentified aerial phenomena and ongoing investigations. But the hushed conversations on the streets carried a different weight, a primal fear that resonated beyond rational explanation. Despite the growing citywide fascination and fear, I never truly believed I would become anything more than a distant observer, another face craning skyward. Then came that night. The night the sky ceased to be a distant canvas and became a suffocating presence. The night a light, not of this world, descended, and the whispers turned into a scream trapped within my own mind. The night I learned that some stories are not observed but lived. St. Petersburg, 2011. A city of imperial ghosts and modern anxieties. The grandeur of the Winter Palace and the Hermitage stood in stark contrast to the crumbling facades of pre-revolutionary buildings, mirroring a society caught between its glorious past and an uncertain future. That summer, the uncertainty took a celestial form. Whispers of UFOs, Tarelki, as they were sometimes jokingly called, floated through the city's humid air, clinging to conversations like the persistent scent of damp earth after a summer rain. For most, it was a fleeting distraction, a topic for water-cooler gossip or late-night debates fueled by cheap beer and stronger spirits. But for Anya Petrova, these whispers resonated deeper. Anya, 22, with eyes that seemed to absorb more light than they reflected, was an art student adrift in the city's artistic currents. Her world was rendered in charcoal and graphite, shades of grey mirroring her own introspective nature. Orphaned by her mother at a young age, raised by a pragmatic, emotionally distant father, a physicist consumed by the tangible world, Anya sought solace and understanding in the intangible realm of art and the echoing silence of museums. Her apartment, nestled in a labyrinthine building near Vasilyevsky Island, was a sanctuary and a prison. Its high ceilings and faded grandeur spoke of a past she barely knew, a past that, much like the UFO sightings, hinted at mysteries beyond the readily explainable. Her father, Professor Dmitry Volkov, a man grounded in empirical evidence and cold logic, dismissed the sightings with scientific derision. Optical illusions, mass hysteria, he'd declare, his pronouncements echoing in the cavernous apartment, further isolating Anya in her own burgeoning unease. Initially, Anya shared her father's skepticism, viewing the sightings as distant curiosities. Yet, as they persisted, as the reports grew more detailed, more insistent, a subtle shift occurred. Within her, the lights in the sky ceased to be abstract phenomena and became intertwined with her own internal landscape of unspoken anxieties and inherited silences. A flicker of something akin to recognition sparked within her, a sense that these celestial events were not random, but somehow connected to the unspoken narratives that haunted the edges of her own life. The distant lights in the sky began to feel less distant, more personal. The sightings intensified, no longer distant flickers but brazen displays closer to the city. Anya's unease morphed into chilling certainty. These lights weren't random. They felt directed, focused, on her. Whispers of her mother's strange research before her untimely death echoed in Anya's mind, a forgotten history suddenly pulsing with terrifying relevance. The sky, once a distant wonder, now felt like a closing trap. Driven by a chilling premonition, Anya's initial goal became clear: uncover the truth behind the sightings and, more urgently, their unsettling resonance with fragmented memories of her mother. This quest immediately slammed against a formidable obstacle: her father's unwavering scientific rationalism. Professor Volkov, a man of equations and empirical data, dismissed Anya's anxieties as youthful fancy, her mother's research as unfortunate, distractions from her true scientific potential, a phrase that always stung with unspoken grief. His wall of logic became the first barrier Anya needed to breach. Fueled by a growing sense of dread, Anya started her own quiet investigation. Late nights were spent in hushed corners of libraries, not poring over art books, but obscure scientific journals, anything that hinted at her mother's work. She discovered cryptic notes, fragmented research papers filled with unsettling diagrams and equations that seemed to dance on the edge of known physics, whispers of theories her father had always dismissed as fringe and unscientific. These cryptic documents became her first tangible clues, breadcrumbs leading into a labyrinth of family secrets and potentially terrifying truths. Beyond her father's skepticism, the city itself presented another obstacle, a wall of polite disbelief. While whispers circulated, open discussion was met with rolled eyes and nervous laughter. To voice her growing fear felt akin to admitting madness. Yet, Anya noticed subtle shifts in the city's atmosphere. Fleeting glances skyward, hushed conversations abruptly silenced as she approached, a shared, unspoken anxiety simmering beneath the surface of Petersburg's stoic facade. She was not alone in her unease, but desperately alone in her active pursuit of answers. The isolation amplified her fear, pushing her further into the shadows of her own investigation, a solitary figure navigating a city that was rapidly becoming less familiar, more ominous. Anya's evenings had settled into a routine of hushed library visits and furtive readings of her mother's fragmented research, always under the looming, albeit distant, presence of the city's aerial mysteries. She'd become adept at navigating the hushed halls of the National Library, tracing faded Cyrillic script and puzzling over diagrams that hinted at dimensions beyond human perception. The UFO sightings remained a backdrop, a persistent hum in the city's consciousness, but still external to her immediate world. One late summer night, returning to her apartment after another fruitless library session, the sky was unusually clear, the stars sharp and cold above the Petersburg skyline. As she unlocked her apartment door, a pulsating blue light flooded the hallway from her window, an intensity far beyond any city glow. It wasn't distant anymore. It was here. Panic seized her, a cold fist clenching around her heart. This was no distant phenomenon. This was targeted, focused, and terrifyingly close. Before she could react, before she could even scream, the light intensified, washing over her, through her, engulfing everything. The familiar scent of old wood and dust in her apartment was replaced by a sterile, metallic tang. The floor seemed to dissolve beneath her, the solid walls blurring, and a sensation of weightlessness, disorienting and nauseating, ripped through her. Reality fractured. The abduction was brutal, swift, and utterly unexpected. One moment she was Anya, art student in St. Petersburg, grappling with family secrets and distant lights in the sky. The next, she was adrift in a sensory void, ripped from her life, her identity, thrust into an alien reality she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The detached observer had become the unwilling participant, the distant mystery violently, terrifyingly personal. Her quiet investigation was no longer a choice, but a desperate necessity for survival, for sanity in a world turned upside down. Returning to her apartment was not a return to normalcy. The blue light was gone, replaced by the pre-dawn gloom of a Petersburg morning. But Anya was irrevocably altered. Disoriented, nauseous, and with a searing psychic echo of alien observation, she found strange, geometric burns etched into her wooden floor. Tangible, horrifying proof of the impossible. These marks became both a terrifying anchor to her experience and a source of immediate conflict. Her father, confronted with the undeniable physical evidence, remained stubbornly skeptical, attributing the burns to electrical surges or some bizarre atmospheric phenomenon. Anything but the truth Anya now carried within her bones. His denial deepened the chasm between them, leaving Anya utterly isolated with her trauma. Driven by a desperate need for validation and understanding, Anya sought out others who might have seen the lights, experienced similar anomalies. This quest led her to a clandestine online forum, a digital whisper network of skywatchers and experiencers. Here, amidst the noise of conspiracy theories, she found Eleanor, a sharp-witted journalist who had been discreetly investigating the sightings for months. Elena, initially cautious, recognized a chilling authenticity in Anya's account, and the photographs Anya hesitantly shared of the floor markings. Elena became Anya's reluctant ally, offering a different kind of support than validation, a path towards investigation, a way to channel Anya's terror into action. Elena introduced a subplot, rumors of a shadowy government organization monitoring the sightings, potentially silencing witnesses. This added a layer of human agency, a terrestrial conspiracy intertwined with the extraterrestrial mystery, further complicating Anya's already precarious reality and solidifying her motivation, no longer just to understand, but to expose the truth, whatever the cost. Anya's fragile semblance of control fractured further as the weeks passed. Nightmares intensified, blurring the line between waking and the terror of the abduction. The city, once familiar, now felt like a surveillance grid, every shadow potentially concealing watchful eyes, both alien and human. Elena's investigation into the shadowy government agency yielded unsettling results. Hushed testimonies of silenced witnesses, redacted documents hinting at clandestine operations, a chilling pattern of official denial and covert interference. The stakes escalated dramatically. This new threat amplified the tension in Anya's already strained relationship with her father. Professor Volkov, witnessing Anya's growing paranoia and obsessive pursuit of the unexplained, resorted to increasingly desperate measures, scheduling psychiatric evaluations, pleading with her to abandon her fantasies. His fear, though misplaced, was palpable, creating a suffocating atmosphere of mistrust and misunderstanding within their shared apartment. Elena, too, felt the pressure mounting. Anonymous threats began appearing online. Her sources grew skittish, and a constant feeling of being watched settled over her own investigation. The subplots intertwined, revealing a terrifying possibility. The government agency wasn't just monitoring the UFO sightings. They were actively suppressing information, potentially complicit or even collaborators in the alien presence. Anya's mother's research, once a personal mystery, now seemed to be a key piece in a much larger, far more dangerous puzzle. Every step Anya and Elena took forward felt like venturing deeper into a labyrinth of deception and danger, with invisible forces closing in, the city around them becoming less a sanctuary and more a hunting ground. Elena and Anya's investigation reached a critical turning point with a decrypted file from her mother's research. It wasn't just physics equations, it was a detailed log of communication attempts with the entities in the sightings. The log spoke of a government initiative, Project Nightingale, her mother's forced participation, and a terrifying truth. The aliens weren't merely observing, they were seeking something specific from humanity, something tied to human consciousness itself. This revelation shifted everything. The shadowy organization wasn't just covering up. They were actively involved, manipulating events, potentially even facilitating the alien agenda. The discovery plunged Anya into deeper turmoil, confirming her deepest fears, but also igniting a fierce resolve to understand her mother's fate and expose the conspiracy. Elena, witnessing Anya's transformation from terrified victim to determined seeker of truth, solidified her commitment. The threats intensified, becoming more direct, yet Elena pressed on, driven by journalistic integrity and a growing sense of responsibility towards Anya. Professor Volkov, confronted with fragments of his late wife's work Anya unearthed, began to waver. his scientific certainty cracking under the weight of undeniable evidence. His denial transformed into a tormented silence, hinting at repressed knowledge, a buried past. All threads were converging: the personal trauma of abduction, the governmental conspiracy, the alien agenda, leading to a precipice. The climax was imminent, a confrontation looming not just with shadowy figures, but with the terrifying unknown itself, poised to erupt from the Petersburg sky. Driven by her mother's research, Anya and Elena planned a daring act: to publicly release the decrypted files, forcing exposure and demanding answers. They knew this was a gamble, potentially dangerous, but silence was no longer an option. Subtle acts of sabotage began. Elena's apartment was ransacked. Anya found her sketchbook defaced with chillingly alien symbols, low-level intimidation tactics designed to sow fear and halt their progress. These minor confrontations only solidified their resolve. Unexpectedly, Professor Volkov, haunted by Anya's distress and the undeniable evidence of his wife's work, extended a fragile olive branch. He didn't confess outright complicity, but admitted to knowing more than he let on, offering cryptic warnings and access to secure old research facilities he still had connections to. A surprising, if hesitant, alliance forged in the crucible of shared fear and long-buried guilt. This shift in her father was a minor resolution in their personal subplot, but a major catalyst for the impending climax, providing Anya with resources and a semblance of familial support she hadn't anticipated. Elena, through her network of contacts, uncovered the location of a rumored government black site just outside St. Petersburg, a place whispered to be connected to Project Nightingale and the UFO sightings. This became their target, the source of the conspiracy, the potential key to understanding the alien agenda, and the location for their final, desperate stand. A sense of grim inevitability settled over them, the foreshadowing of a major confrontation hanging heavy in the air. The stage was set. Petersburg, with its beautiful facades and hidden shadows, was about to become the epicenter of a terrifying unveiling. The tension ratcheted to a breaking point. The planned data release was imminent, a digital bomb about to detonate, and the backlash was already intensifying. Elena's communications were compromised, her apartment now openly watched, transforming her sanctuary into a gilded cage. Anya, plagued by increasingly vivid nightmares and a chilling sense of alien surveillance, felt her sanity fraying, the line between reality and abduction-induced paranoia blurring dangerously. The emotional stakes were brutally clear. Exposure meant risking everything. Potential imprisonment, perhaps worse, but silence guaranteed complicity in a terrifying deception. Professor Volkov, wrestling with his conscience, became a volatile mix of guilt and fear-driven resolve. He provided Anya and Elena with access codes to the secure facility, a hidden location within the city's sprawling underbelly, but his demeanor shifted erratically between anxious support and panicked withdrawal, reflecting his own precarious position within the unfolding conspiracy. His internal conflict mirrored the external threat, amplifying the sense of unpredictable danger that surrounded them. The final hours felt like the breathless calm before a storm. Petersburg, outwardly serene in its twilight beauty, felt like a city holding its breath. Anya, Elena, and Professor Volkov were on the precipice, poised to confront not just the shadowy figures of the government agency, but the terrifying implications of the alien presence itself. All narrative threads, Anya's personal trauma, Elena's journalistic pursuit, Professor Volkov's buried past were now tightly interwoven, converging on a single point of explosive confrontation. The climax was not just approaching, it was inevitable, promising a devastating unveiling in the heart of the unsuspecting city. Entering the black site, guided by Professor Volkov's uneasy directions, Anya and Elena navigated sterile corridors humming with concealed technology. They reached the central server room, the heart of Project Nightingale, guarded not by soldiers, but scientists in lab coats, their faces masks of cold calculation. A tense standoff ensued, words sharper than weapons revealing the horrifying extent of the project. Not just monitoring, but active facilitation of alien interaction, driven by a misguided pursuit of technological advancement at the cost of human autonomy. Elena initiated the data upload, the decrypted files flooding onto the internet, a digital tsunami crashing against the walls of secrecy. Alarms blared, guards converged, but the data was out, irreversible. Chaos erupted within the facility, within the city as news spread, finally breaking through the wall of official denial. The Petersburg sky, moments before serene, now pulsed with renewed, undeniable aerial activity, as if responding to the exposed truth. Anya, standing beside Elena as the world outside their confined space descended into pandemonium, felt a profound shift. The terror hadn't vanished, but it was now channeled into purpose. Her abduction, once a source of paralyzing fear, had become the catalyst for exposure, for truth. Professor Volkov, witnessing the unfolding chaos, offered a grim nod of acknowledgement, a silent reconciliation in the face of overwhelming consequences. The immediate aftermath was pandemonium, but also a dawning awareness. The official narrative crumbled, replaced by a torrent of questions, fear, and a desperate scramble for answers. For Anya and Elena, standing amidst the wreckage of secrets and lies, there was no easy victory, no complete resolution. The alien presence remained a chilling unknown. But the truth was out, and truth, however terrifying, is the first step towards understanding, towards defense, towards reclaiming our own narrative. Look to the skies, question authority. The case of St. Petersburg is not closed, it is a warning. Be vigilant. In the aftermath, Petersburg was forever changed. The exposed files ignited global debate, shattering trust in institutions, birthing both panic and a fervent demand for transparency. Elena became an unwilling icon of truth, her career irrevocably altered, her future uncertain but purposeful. Professor Volkov, facing public scrutiny and the weight of his past, chose a quiet exile, seeking solace in scientific pursuits forever marked by complicity and a late-found courage. Anya, though still haunted by the abduction, found a fragile agency in her trauma. Her art transformed, no longer muted grays but stark, visceral depictions of the unseen, the violated, the fight for truth. The alien presence remained an enigma, unanswered questions lingering in the city's skyline. No triumphant victory, no clear answers, only the unsettling truth exposed, a fragile crack in the wall of denial. The world knew now, or at least suspected, the comfortable lie shattered. The true horror perhaps wasn't just the aliens, but the human capacity for deception, for control, for sacrificing individual experience for perceived order. Remember St. Petersburg. The sky is not empty. Truth is a fight. Never stop looking up. So, what did you think of this story? Did it scare you? Was there a part that gave you chills or stuck with you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you've had a similar experience or have suggestions for improving future videos, let me know too. Thank you for watching and being part of this amazing community. See you in the next story.